Hi, this is Jeff from Mowers4u. Today I'm here to talk to you about carburetor pressure gauges. Now, carburetor pressure gauge is probably a tool you haven't given a lot of thought to, but let me tell you, this is a critical tool. This is a tool you have to have in your toolbox if you're doing any kind of carburetor work. There are two styles of gauges. This goes from 0 to 15 psi, and this one goes from 0 to 60 psi. Basically the same gauge, just with different pressure gauges on them. Now, what this tool will do is it's going to check on a float style carburetor whether you have any leakage on your needle and seat. Make sure you're getting a good tight seal on that. On the diaphragm carburetor, same way. So now you're going to be able to go through these and basically tell if you've got a good seal, if you're leaking, among other things. So I'm going to give you a couple of good examples of how you could put this tool to use and really how it could save you a ton of time and money. So this gauge comes in a kit. You get the gauge, 3 pieces of fuel line, one long and one short 1/4 inch ID fuel line, and just a smaller piece of fuel line for the diaphragm style carburetors, and a little adapter to go from the 1/4 inch down to the smaller sizes. So first, let me show you what this can do on a float style carburetor. You could use the short piece on there or the long piece, depending on if your carburetor's mounted on or not. Which actually you don't want to use this on a carburetor mounted. You're going to want to remove it. So let's just put the short piece on there. Hooks right on. This is a release valve on the bottom. Just snug that up, and if we push it this way, there's no pressure, because this acts just like the fuel. It's going straight into the carburetor. So just like your gas would be going in, you're checking really to see, hey, everything's open, gas should flow into the carburetor. Now if we flip the carburetor upside down, this simulates the bowl being filled with gas, so it should shut the needle valve off. So we're going to pump this twice, take it up to 9 psi, even we could go a little higher. Oh, and you see it popped? That showed us that pressure pushed the needle valve up, overcame the force of the float, and it came back down. So we're going to take it up to about 9 though, right in here. Now again, this is a new carburetor, so it's really not seating real well. But what you're going to do is, if it was wet, as we said before, take the carburetor after it's had some gas, you've tested it. What you want to do is make sure that pressure gauge is going to hold. It shouldn't drop down. You could put it on here, walk away for 15 minutes, come back. That thing should be holding steady. If it's not, you're getting leakage. So in other words, your carburetor is sitting on your engine, fuel's flowing through it, and over a period of time, it's going to flow up into the throat of the carburetor. You're going to get flooding, and more than likely that fuel then is going to end up in your engine. It's going to get into your oil, and you're going to end up blowing up your motor. Oil will get too thin, goodbye motor. That's why this is a great little tool. If you're doing service work, you've already overhauled the carburetor, good way to check to see that your work's been done right. You don't want to put it on, take it off, go through that many times. Unbelievable tool. When you're done, you release it, takes the pressure off, and you pop it off. When you pump this all the way up, as I showed you before, it does simulate that the valve's releasing. So you're testing two things. One is the valve sticking? Yes or no? Well, if it popped off, came back down, it's not sticking. Now is it holding pressure? Yes. So it's seating well. So that's what you could do on a float style carburetor. Great thing. Now when we go to the diaphragm style carburetors, we're going to take our little adapter, put it in there, take our smaller fuel line, put it on, tighten our valve back up. Same kind of deal. We're going to push this on to our fuel fitting. Now this one doesn't have a primer bulb, only one fitting. We're going to do the same thing. We're just going to take this up to about 6. That's recommended by Zalma Walbro. You want to take it up to run in that 6-pound area. And same thing, you're going to see if it holds. And if it doesn't hold, now you got a problem. Now you got leakage. So we're going to pop this off. One of two things could be going on. Your needle valve inside may not be seating, could have dirt in there, could be worn, Or you could have one of the gaskets around the diaphragms leaking. Oh, that's a little tougher to check. You'd have to submerge it into water or fuel. Really don't want to stick it in gas, do you? But some type of liquid, and then pump it up and see if you get bubbles going around it. But pretty much if it's leaking down, you're going to take this thing apart, you're going to rebuild it, throw new gaskets, diaphragms, and a needle and seat in it. When you see that, it's telling you this thing needs to be redone. No different on this when you have the fuel supply and return for a primer bulb. If you go on the return side and you pump this up, the gauge is basically going to do nothing. You're on the wrong side. When you go onto the other side, you pump it up. Now on this one here, you can see the gauge very slowly. Now this is a used carburetor. It's been around for a little while. It's starting to drop slightly. That I expect. This is an older carburetor. It's due. So you're going to replace the needle valve in this and gaskets and diaphragm, do a little overhaul. One last little trick with this thing. Fuel tank. Now, this is a home light fuel tank where the fuel lines have a tight fit in the tank. Gas caps on there tight. What we could do, this is the return line. I could hook this right up to the return line. And what I am going to do is I'm going to just take a little pin punch. This is tapered. I'm going to stick it into my fuel supply line and I'm going to pump this up. Now we're going to pressurize the tank, so it's going to take a little bit to keep pumping it till we get up to around, let's just say we take it up to like 3 psi. Again, you're putting a volume of air into this thing to pressurize it, so it's going to take quite a few pumps to get it up there. So you're thinking to yourself, what am I gaining by doing this, right? Well, for one, if that gauge starts to drop, one of two things. You've got a bad fuel line seal between the gas lines in your tank, or your cap's not on tight. So you want to check to see if you've got a good seal after you put your fuel lines on here. It's a great little test. If you have a vacuum gauge, you could actually do the opposite. Put a vacuum pump on this, plug this, suck it down, and see if your check valve inside your cap releases. Pressurizing it, it doesn't let any air come out, but as the gas level goes down inside the tank, you need air to come in, which is through that little duct bill on the inside of your caps. So you could do it the opposite by putting a vacuum gauge on here, sucking it down, and see if that pops open. Really not as popular as doing the pressure on the carburetors and stuff. The pressure gauge, much better tool than a vacuum gauge. You get a lot more use out of it. It's going to save you a lot of money. These things go for about 60 bucks roughly when I'm making this video here in July of 2014. And again, you get the fuel lines with it and the little adapter. Great tool. You got to have it in your toolbox. Remember, everybody works on lawnmowers, but not everybody fixes them. We're trying to help you fix them. Have a great day. Thank you very much from Mowers4u.